Okay, thank you. Harihi Om Ganana Tva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavim Kavinamupamashravastamam Jyeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspatha Anashunvannodibhissedasadanam Prano Devi Saraswati Vaje Virbhajinivati Dhinama Mitrayavatho Ganeshaya Namaha Saraswatyai Namaha Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om Jnananandamayam Devam Nirmalarspatikatrudhim Adharam Sarvavidyanam Hayagrivamupaasmahe Yasya Varadavakratyaya Parishatya Parashatham Vignam Nignam Tisatatam Vishwashremam Tamashraye Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwaraha Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Gurave Sarvalokanam Bisaje Bhavaroginaha Nidaye Sarva Vidyanam Sri Dakshinamurthaye Namaha Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Narayanarphanamastu Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnana Mudraya Krishnaya Gitamrutaduhe Namaha Sarvopanishadho Ghavo Dhogda Gopalanandanaha Partho Vatsat Sudhir Bhokta Dugdha Gitamrutat Mahat Vasute Vasutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagatgurum Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Krishnarphanamastu Om Tat Sat. A very warm welcome to everybody who's joined in today on the first session of what is, or what promises to be, an enthralling journey that takes you through the battlefield of Kurukshetra, so that you experience, or you should experience, what actually happened on the battlefield and what was the role played by each one of the players. And that verily takes us across this ocean of life. Once we understand the inner significance of who did what to whom and what was the result of their actions and the consequences they faced as a result of their thought process, as a result of their word process, and as a result of their actions, then we will understand in this life what sort of thought process should we have, what sort of speech process should we have, and what sort of actions should we inculcate in our day-to-day life. Okay, so what we are doing is, today is just an introduction of giving you a solid background to the Bhagavad Gita, especially what took place in the battlefield. You must understand, in the entire Mahabharata, the Gita is just a small portion, right? It's a build-up, and then bang, on one day, the Gita is given, right? So Bhagavad Gita is not the Mahabharata. Bhagavad Gita is what you might say something that comes out, an emanation of the epic of Mahabharata. So today I'm going to give you introduction and some background information so that you are clear. And against that background, we will build every week, right? Until we finish. So again, week 1 today is introduction, background, and then weeks 2 to 10, right? Weeks 2 to 10, every week I will take 2 chapters, right? So 18 chapters is 9 weeks. So we would have covered the entire Bhagavad Gita in the following 9 weeks to come. And what I have done is I've also spent some time to prepare some reflection, some reflective exercises that you can reflect on after each session with me, so that you can then think about what you heard. Perhaps you want to do some reading. On that reflection exercise, I will tell you what are the resources that we have identified that you can read the chapter. So there is a PDF version of the Gita Vahini, and every week after I finish, I will say this is what you need to read from this page to this page, and this is what you have to do. Okay, and then in week 11 we have like a summary of what needs to be done. Okay, review, consolidation, a question answer sort of thing. So what am I going to be doing every week? Am I going to be teaching you how to chant the Gita shlokas? No, that's not the job here, right? So every week we have a learning objective, right? Every week we'll cover 2 chapters. I'll tell you what is the chapter significance, and then we'll take some shlokas representing the chapter, and I will tell you, well, there are 3 things that you must do as a result of this, right? What each chapter means. That means your understanding of the chapter, focusing purely on the yogas and the gunas, and then what you can receive from that chapter as part of your own spiritual learning and spiritual evolution or spiritual development or spiritual progress. What comes to you as a result of you hearing chapter 1 and hearing chapter 2 next week, then chapter 3 and chapter 4 the following week, right? So, and most importantly, what you can get in terms of personal transformation, right? Personal transformation is the end result, not whether you are able to chant. Not whether you are able to chant. So let me clarify again, right? The idea of having these sessions is to take you inside the Mahabharata and inside, right, the Bhagavad Gita, to show you how to live this life here and now, today, right? Don't worry if you can't chant one single verse. That is not the issue, right? If 2 people die, right? One is a scholar, a pandit, who can chant all the shlokas, right? Actually, it takes about 2.5 hours for someone to recite the entire Bhagavad Gita, right? Without talking about the meaning, right? The 700 shlokas, 2.5 hours easily you can do, right? Someone who's really well versed and who's really competent, you can do it within 2 hours or 1 hour 45 minutes. So let me stop here and tell you a story about a scholar and a Brahmin man, right? This happened in Kashi. So this Brahmin man was walking. In his hand, he was holding a Bhagavad Gita book, and he was just tearing. Wherever he looked, he was tearing. This scholar who came out from the Vedic University in Kashi, very well versed. So he saw this man, and he saw this man having the Bhagavad Gita book. And he went and approached him and he said, "Sir, why are you in tears? I can see that you are reading the Gita. Perhaps it is the case that you do not understand what you read. Perhaps it is of too high philosophical value that you are now shedding tears of not understanding, of a lack of comprehension. Perhaps I can help. I am a Sanskrit scholar and I can read the entire Gita shlokas." And the Brahmin man said, "I am not crying because I cannot read or I cannot understand. I am crying because everywhere I see either Krishna or I see Arjuna. Everywhere I turn, I see that. So I am crying tears of joy that I am verily experiencing the Gita rather than just reading the Gita. At that point in time, the scholar realized that it is not reading the Gita, it is not chanting the shlokas of the Gita, it is not knowing the content of Gita, it is not being able to talk about the Gita that is important. What is important is to practicalize the teachings of the Gita, because the Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam means God, Gita means song. God is telling man through the prose of the Gita shlokas how man should live his life on earth. Forget it, it was, the 8th avatar and it took place, 8,000 years ago and so on and so forth. The lesson is here and now. What can you learn from this? So I am going to start by taking you to the battlefield. The battlefield of Kurukshetra, right? Kurukshetra. Kuru means Kuru dynasty. Kshetra means place. So the battle took place in this area. Now I want you, because one of the fundamental teachings of the Gita is the polishing of the mind. Polishing of the mind and sharpening of the thoughts, so that there is harmony in the balance between what is thought inside and what comes out as words and what manifests as actions. Okay, so I want you to go inside your mind now, and I'm going to take you to this battlefield. And as I tell you the picture of the battlefield, I actually want you to imagine you are actually watching it. Just like Dhritarashtra was being told by Sanjaya, even though he was blind, the description, right, given by Sanjaya was so on point that Dhritarashtra could actually experience the war sitting in his palace. That's the same experience. This is where you have to completely focus, right? So you picture the battlefield, a huge land, right? Then right in the middle, I want you to picture a chariot, right? You can make some notes as I am saying, right? Because you may not be able to take in all the information that I'm giving, right? So that is a chariot. The chariot is standing on 4 wheels, okay? And there are 5 horses in the chariot. Krishna is standing and holding the reins to the 5 horses. Arjuna is listening to Krishna because Krishna is slightly turned back. He's holding the reins on one hand and he's turned back. He's looking at Arjuna like this and he's talking. You can picture this. Many of you would have seen these pictures or seen this, wall pictures or wall hanging ornaments and things like that. Chariot on 4 wheels, 5 horses. Krishna standing slightly turned facing to Arjuna. Krishna is holding the reins on in his hands. He's looking at Arjuna. The chariot has got a flag post at the top. On the flag there is Hanuman, right? And then on the side, in front, there is a clear path in front of the chariot. On the right side, the Kaurava forces are there. So you can see all the elephants, the gallant army, the horses, the warriors, everything. On this side, you have the Pandava forces. And right at the end, you have the horizon, clear blue skies. I hope you're able to picture this, because now I'm going to tell you what each one of this means. There you will realize just the picture gives you an entire, right, dogma of what this great epic means. Okay, so let me just repeat so that everybody is in the picture, right? A chariot right in the middle. There is a clear path in front of the chariot. The chariot is standing on 4 wheels, right? On the chariot, there's Krishna. Krishna is holding the reins that connect to 5 horses. He's turned back slightly looking at Arjuna. Arjuna is sat in the chariot. On the chariot at the top, there is a flag post. On the flag, there is Hanuman, right? And then in front, as I said, there's a clear path. On the right-hand side, all the Kaurava forces, all the animals, all the warriors. On the right side, the Pandava forces, again, all the animals, all the warriors. And then right in front is the horizon, clear blue skies. Now let us go into this. First, let's talk about the chariot, right? The chariot is based on 4 solid wheels, right? and the chariot is standing erect. That contraption is solidly standing on four wheels. The chariot represents your body, Deha. That's why it is said in the Vedas, Deha Devolaya. Body is the temple of God. Unless the body is solidly standing on basic principles of life, you will not be able to stand and go through life with ease. So the chariot represents the body. The four wheels that holds the chariot represents the four Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. The four wheels also represent the four Vedas, right? Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Tatpana Veda, and Sama Veda, because principles of life must be based on the universality of the teachings based or found in these Vedas. All the Purusharthas, Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, right? The four wheels also represent the four yogas that is taught by Krishna to Arjuna. Raja Yoga, or Dhyana Yoga, Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, right? The four paths to reach moksha. So you see, just the four wheels have so much to teach us. Then, of course, you have the five horses. These are your five senses, right? These are your five senses. I'm just turning recording on. These are the five senses. Pancha Indriyas and your Jnana Indriyas, five senses of perception and five organic senses, the horses, right? But what is controlling the horses is the reins, the reins that come from the horse that Krishna is holding in one hand. What do the reins represent? The reins represent viveka, or discrimination. If you don't have discrimination in controlling your senses, whether they are organic or perceptive, then you know what will happen if you don't control the horses. The five horses there, if Krishna leaves the rein, what will happen? You can imagine the chaos. So the reins held by Krishna represents viveka, or discrimination, that connects to the five horses. The horses represent your pancha indriyas and your karma indriyas, your senses of organic senses and your perceptive senses, right? Okay, so what is Krishna then? Krishna is buddhi, or intellect. So the buddhi is the one that can exercise discrimination in order to control your senses. That is why I said to you earlier at the outset, it's all about controlling the mind, right? Because what comes in the mind? My 3 weeks of karma, I would have told you, isn't it? Desire. Thoughts become desire. Desire becomes actions. Actions produce consequences, and there we are bound. Punarjanmaha, right? What is Arjuna? Arjuna is manas, the mind. Only when the intellect is in a position to control its senses, it can rightly and properly dictate to the mind that is always losing its balance, always being attracted to the moha vasanas, always being attracted to maya. So Krishna, buddhi. Arjuna, manas, mind. Get the picture. Now, someone asked me once, what is Hanuman doing on the flag in the 8th avatar in Dwapara Yuga? Hanuman was in Rama Yuga, no? So what is he doing on the flag in Dwapara Yuga with Krishna? So I say to them, I said, Hanuman is Chiranjeevi. Kalatraya, he's passed all three kalas. So he's neither in the past, nor the present, nor the future. He is eternal. That's one of his qualities, right? Now, him being in the flag, don't worry what Hanuman is doing there. What you have to think is, what is the significance of Hanuman being there, right? And I want you to change your thought process, right? Ask yourself, what is the significance of this to me? Don't ask who drew this picture, what is he doing there, why they painted him, it's a different yugas. All that is not your question. Question is, how does this relate to me? And everything is relative, right? If you believe the scientific theory of relativity, then you have to believe the itihasic theory of relativity to life. It's got complete relationship to the pranajivas, life. So Hanuman represents two things, right? One is the flag, right? The flag flying represents faith. In the winds of adversity, the flag is flying high, the flag is flying strong, the flag is flying straight. That represents faith. Faith in adversity. That is what you should relate to. And Hanuman represents bhakti. So two things when you are facing adversities in life, two things when you are facing calamities in life, two things when you are facing problems in life. One is bhakti, devotion. The other is shraddha, faith. That is the purpose of the flag flying high with Hanuman there. Okay. Next, I said to you, there's a clear path in front of the horses. What does that represent? Then I said on the right side, the Kaurava forces is there. All the animals, all the warriors. On the right side, the Pandava forces. Left side, the Pandava forces are there. Same thing, all the animals, all the warriors. And then as the clear path merges into the horizon. The clear path is your samsara journey, your journey of life. Your journey of life, which all through the path, until you reach moksha, that is the horizon, clear blue skies, you know. That means absence of rebirth. No more punarjanmaha. Throughout, you going through this life, you traversing life, you traveling through life, you will face the Kaurava forces, you will face the Pandava forces. That means Kaurava forces, 100. Pandava forces, 5. So for every 5 good things that will come to you, 100 bad things may come and influence you, may come and attract you, may come and delude you, may come and put you off track. But as long as you tread the path of Dharma, the clear path is the path of Dharma. As long as you're on the path of Dharma and you're following the righteous actions in terms of thoughts, the righteous actions in terms of words, and the righteous actions in terms of actions, then you will reach the horizon, because you're following the dharmic path as dictated to the Pandavas, as practiced by the Pandavas, and you're not giving in to Kauravas. How you're not doing it? Because Krishna controlling, you are exercising discrimination to control your senses. Okay, you see, just the picture can give you so much of inner significance and inner message and inner meaning. Can you imagine the entire conversation between God and man? Can you imagine? So it's fantastic, you know. I mean, you see a lot of things on TV, isn't it? You see a lot of these stories, these serials. Please don't follow the story, because they are commercially made, right? They are made to sell, and whatever is injected in those serials may not be the truth. They may have been, you know, exhumed a little bit, exaggerated a little bit, embalmed a little bit, just to make it sell. Okay? So what is important is not what the story is, but what the lesson is. Looking at the behavior of each of the character and the karmic consequences of that behavior, that is what you have to take notice, not just take notice. Having taken notice, you need to apply in your life. Like I said, not reading the shlokas, not chanting the shlokas, not reciting the shlokas with whatever degree of competence or level of depth, but practicing, you know. Like I told you, once in Birmingham, I went and spoke on the Gita for about an hour and a half, and one uncle came and said to me, I've read the Gita so many times, but, you know, nothing is going through me. I said to him, Uncle, it's not how many times you read the Gita, it's how much of the Gita goes through you. That is the important thing, right? And when I did Bhaja Govindam, I told you about the story of the old man and his grandson and the coal basket, right? So the Gita is like that. It will wash you inside out, but there must be some repetition in that, in your actions. Continuously, without fail, you are dedicated to that act. And yes, you will see the difference slowly taking place. Even if you don't see the difference, others will see the difference in you, right? So basically what had happened is, to cut the long story short, right? After a long training and being recognized as the most gallant warrior, in the land, Arjuna is faced with a great battle. Of course, on the side of righteousness versus the side of unrighteousness, dharma against adharma. He and his 4 other brothers, the Pandavas, were fighting on the righteous side. And of course, on the other side, his cousins and their allies were fighting, right? Unfortunately, Arjuna's revered teacher and beloved guru, right? And of course, Pitama, Bhishmacharya and Dronacharya were fighting on the side of the cousins. That's the story. What does that apply to you and me today? Today, how does that apply? What I've just said to you. The lesson is, in today's life, in today's world, in this day and age, sometimes those people who are most near and dear to us will be against us. That is the lesson. You need to be prepared. Prepared means how? What did they do? 5 of them. Who did they have leading them? That one force called the Parabrahman. Krishna himself was there, but he had undertaken not to take arms. He said, I will not take arms against either side. And if you remember, there's one part of the story where he calls Arjuna and he calls Duryodhana and he says, look, these are the cards on the table, right? Either you have my entire, army, 18 crore army, all fantastically trained, versatile in all acts of warfare. Or you can have me. I will not take arms, but I will just be a Sarathi for you. Sarathi means charioteer, right? I will drive the chariot for you. And he, of course, the God knows. He knows what kind of a man Arjuna was, what is his state of mind, and he knows what kind of a man Duryodhana is, and what is his state of mind. And he gives Duryodhana the choice first. He says, Duryodhana, you choose, because you are the elder fellow, right? This is teaching reverence, right? Because some people ask me, but why did Krishna ask Duryodhana to choose first? He knows Duryodhana is adharmic. That's not the issue. The reverence, the lesson is reverence. Always give respect to people elder to you. Arjuna said, no problem, let my elder brother choose. Right? Even before going to war, he still referred to his Duryodhana as elder brother. How many of us in today's life, we have a small quarrel or we have a little tiff with our family and we don't talk to them for years and years and years? That fellow, not my brother. That person, not my sister, sorry. Lesson. That's what I'm saying, that personal transformation must happen as a result of you listening to all this, right? Without that personal transformation, even if at the end of the day you can recite all 700 slokas, it's of no good, right? So, Duryodhana said, what's the use? I have got superb drivers of my chariot. I don't need Krishna to drive, So I will take your 18. And Krishna said, okay, Arjuna, are you happy to have me as your charioteer? He said, yes. That's also another version, right? Krishna had called both Duryodhana and Arjuna to come and see him to discuss about the war. Okay. So Duryodhana went first. And he went and sat right beside Krishna's head. Because he said, when Krishna wakes up, the first thing he'll see is me, because I'm right on top of his head. Arjuna went and sat near his feet, prostrating before the feet, sitting near his feet. When Krishna woke up, he first saw Arjuna. And he said, because I have seen you first, you choose whether you want me. See, end of the day, the result is the same. So don't worry about the versions of the story. Yeah? Because on the net, you can find thousands of versions of the Gita. What I'm telling you is, don't focus on the story, focus on the lesson. Then you're fine. So when he opened his eyes, the first thing he saw is, Arjuna at his feet. He said, okay, you choose. Arjuna said, Bhagavan, I choose you. And Duryodhana was saying, stupid fellow, I'll choose your army. So you see, the result is the same. Okay. So again, why did the war start is all about attachment. Attachment to what? Duryodhana had different attachment. Arjuna and the Pandava brothers had different sorts of attachment, even though they were on the path of dharma. See, attachment does not spare anybody, right? So that's a lesson for you. Remember what I was telling you in Bhajagovindam. Satsangatvam, nitsangatve, nitsangatvam, nirmohatve, nirmohatvam, nischalatatvam, nischalatatvam, jivan mukti. Get away from this attachment. But you can only detach after you attach. That is where the characterization of evolution, the spiritual evolution, the growing up, the growing out of attachment comes. Because if you don't attach yourself, you cannot detach. So first, get that attachment and then learn to detach. That's where the power is. And attachment is not a current problem. Yeah, attachment is an age-old problem. You look at Dhritarashtra. He was so attached to Duryodhana, Dushasan, and all the other sons. He was also very attached to the throne, Hastinapur. Dronacharya was so attached to his son Ashwatthama, right? Bhishmacharya was so attached to his dharma that sometimes that very dharma made him do adharmic things. But he was blind because he was so attached to his dharma. So constantly and consistently, you need to exercise something called viveka. That's what the Gita is teaching us. The main problem in this life, right? I'm talking about 2020 now, right? Everybody is attachment, because only attachment creates sorrow. How attachment comes? Desire. So DAS, desire creates attachment, creates sorrow. Right? And because of this attachment, we make wrong decisions because we don't exercise sufficient discrimination. And that is the main cause of human misery. So Gita's teaching is how to live in this world without being touched by this sorrow. That is Gita Saram, the very essence of Gita. You understand? You also must understand that nothing in this world is permanent. Everything you gain, right? If you yourself are impermanent, then what about everything else in this world? Some things will remain even after you, right? That's the nature of their animate or inanimate character. But you yourself are impermanent. So everything you have becomes impermanent as far as you're concerned. So learn to give up everything in terms of the results, award, reward, recognition. Because if you accept award, if you accept reward, if you accept recognition, then you must also accept the flip side of the coin, all the bad. If you want good name, then you have to accept bad name. If you decide to give up everything good, Sarvam Krishna Arpanam, then, you're fine because you're dedicating it to him, right? So whatever you possess, the human nature is you will always see something else and you'll like it. A better house, a better car, someone who's better looking, a better husband, a better wife. You will always have better children, higher education. You will always want something that you do not have, but you never appreciate what you already have. That's the cause of misery. Being attached to something that you don't have and not being detached from what you already have. Two sides of the coin. Right? So the real nature, one of the conversations I'll be telling you between Krishna and Arjuna is, Krishna is telling Arjuna, why are you worried about this? This is something you have to do. It's your duty. Just do it and surrender the axe to me. I am telling you. Why are you worried? Just do as you're told. That is your dharma. You're a Kshatriya. Your duty is to fight and uphold dharma. So what is your problem, Arjuna? Remember, the real nature of the person is not the body, is not the mind. It is Chaitanya, the pure consciousness. And that is what I am trying to bring out in you. Chaitanya is eternal. Body is not eternal. Mind is not eternal. Chaitanya is what relates to the soul. Unconditional happiness you can get if you link and connect to that Chaitanya. A person's sense of security, peace, happiness, it does not depend on anything external. It depends on internal, mind and senses. So if the mind can control the senses, where you are, you work out it. You work out the sum yourself. If the mind can control the senses, then you are constantly in a state of, if the chittam is controlled and you are living in that sat, the truth, then the result is sat plus chit equals ananda. Sat Chit Ananda, truthful thoughts, thoughts based on dharma, thoughts based on right actions, thought based on love, will give you a state of ananda. He that is free from all emotional dependencies, he is the happy one till the end. Ignorance of this fact causes sorrow. The only permanent solution to sorrow, when you go through the Gita and you let the Gita go through you, more importantly, let the Gita go through you, knowledge of one's own true nature. And that is the entire essence of the talk or speech between Krishna and Arjuna. At the end of the talk, Arjuna realizes who he is. So at the end of this life, you and I should realize who we are, because the Gita is talking to us, right? The Gita is talking to us. So you have to become free from desires, from attachment, from sense pleasure, from an uncontrolled or unbridled mind, from numerous hindrances. Once you take this up one by one by one by one by one, then you're left with just pure Chaitanya, pure consciousness, pure knowledge. Possible? Of course, very possible. You look at all the people who have achieved it in this life, right? Therefore, Gita takes you from where you are to where you should be, provided you follow the satellite coordinates. The GPS. I'm not talking about, global positioning system. I'm talking about God positioning your spirituality, godly positioned spiritual path. That's the GPS that you should be following, right? So let me give you some background about the Mahabharata, right? Because I think it's important for us to have some basic understanding of this, right? It happened. The entire war happened because of karmic consequences. And you heard me go on about karmic for the last 3 weeks. Part 1, part 2, and part 3. Right? For those of you who missed it, it's there on YouTube. You can go and listen to it. It's like karma is the basis on which the Mahabharata war happened. Okay. On the first day of the war lasted for 18 days. Right? And that is why it has got 18 chapters. Right? It has got, and on the 18th day, right, Bhishmacharya gave Arjuna Vishnu Sahasranamam. So on the first day you had the Bhagavad Gita. On the last day of the war, the 18th day, you had Vishnu Sahasranamam. Either you follow the Gita or you follow the Vishnu Sahasranamam. One or the other will take you from where you are to where you should be, right? Reciting the Vishnu Sahasranamam also is a sure way of getting you from, what you say, the Brihadaranya Upanishad, isn't it? Asattoma Sadgamaya, Tamastoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amridam Gamaya. That's what I'm talking about. Mrityorma Amridam Gamaya. So first day you had Gita, 18th day you had Vishnu Sahasranam, right? Many Western scientists like Albert Einstein, Schwarzenbach, who's a German scientist, physicist and philosophist, they have read. Mahatma Gandhi, Abdul Kalam, Herman Hesse, Jawaharlal Nehru, all these people have read and they lived by the teachings of the Gita. Okay. Now the Gita previously, before Vyasa took over, was referred to as the Bhishma Parva. And in the Bhishma Parva, there is many chapters, about 70 odd chapters, and chapters 25 to 42 refer to the war. That has been rewritten and recompartmentalized by Veda Vyasa as chapters 1 to 18 in the form of Bhagavad Gita. 18 chapters, 700 verses, originally written in Sanskrit. Now, 700 verses, did Krishna speak all of them? No. The first verse was spoken by Dhritarashtra. And next week I'll tell you. Right? 40 verses was spoken by Sanjaya. So that's why if you are hearing the Gita or if you are listening to it, you say Dhritarashtra uvacha, Sanjaya uvacha, Arjuna uvacha, Krishna uvacha. That means who is saying, right? So Dhritarashtra spoke about 1, Sanjaya spoke about 40, Arjuna spoke about 84 verses, and the rest, I think about 575, right, was spoken about by Krishna, right? And that's what we're focusing on. The main theme is Dharma. Dharma talks about 4 ways in which by practicing that Dharma, you can go by 4 ways to reach God. Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana Yoga, some books refer to it as Raja Yoga. So Raja Yoga and Dhyana Yoga is the same, right? Don't get confused by it. These 4 pathways can lead you to moksha or liberation. Then what happens was Charles Wilkins. He is the first man to translate the Gita into English back in 1785. In English alone, right? There are over 300, translations. 15 different European languages and 75 odd languages worldwide has translated the Gita. Now, when you translate, you have to use, what we call the read between the lines approach, because interpretation is always giving you different meaning, because one word can make a difference, right? If you say Shiva, it means something. If you say Shivai, it means something else. If you say Shivaya, it also has a different meaning, right? So like that, don't focus too much on translated versions, right? Like I said, you don't have to know what verse 17 of chapter 2 is or what 21 of chapter 4 is. You have to know what the teaching is. And if you, as long as you practicalize the teaching, then you're fine. Another thing you got to know, it is not only a conversation. The participation was not only Krishna and Arjuna. Of course, everything stopped once Krishna started, because he is beyond, he is Kalatita. If you look at all the gods, whether it's Vishnu, Shiva, Ganesha, Subramanya, whoever the gods, one of their names, the Ashtotra, Shatanamavali, 108 names, one name is Kalatitaya Namaha, one who's beyond time. So when Arjuna is getting that lesson from Krishna, everything else stops. Arjuna is listening to Krishna. Who else is listening? Who is on the flag I told you? Hanuman. Hanuman also has been described as one of the recipients of the Gita, not just Arjuna, because he's just silently listening. I told you Chiranjeevi, he's alive, right? And the other person was, of course, Sanjaya, who was given the divine sight to see what is happening so that he can tell Dhritarashtra, what is happening. So Arjuna, Sanjaya, and Hanuman all listened to the Gita when Krishna was giving it. Okay? So now I'm going to give you the story about what each chapter means briefly and how many slokas or verses it has in order to give you a complete picture. Then next week, we'll start with chapter 1 and chapter 2, and then we'll go on like that, chapter 3, chapter 4, like that. Okay. So the first chapter is basically describing what is happening in Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra. Your body is the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Your body is the battlefield of Kurukshetra, where constantly there is a battle between the negative forces and the positive forces. What is right? What is wrong? Should I? Should I not? Could I? Could I not? Would I? Would I not? Shall I? Shall I not? Viveka, discrimination. So the first chapter is all about observing both sides of the army in Kurukshetra. That's why it's called Arjuna Vishaddha Yoga. Arjuna Vishaddha Yoga. This chapter 1 has got 46 verses. 46 verses, all talking about the armies, the Pandava armies, what they were doing, the Kaurava armies. The war is going to start. It hasn't begun yet. Of course, again, a dharmic act during, it's what we call in law as just war. The blowing of the conch every day at sunrise marks the beginning of the war, and the same blowing of the conch at sunset marks the end of the war. During the war, they fight. At the end of the war, if somebody is injured, they help each other. But next day, they fight again, the blowing of the conch. So chapter 1 talks about what Arjuna is saying. Arjuna said to Krishna, let's go to the battlefield and see what is happening, right? So he goes there, and when he goes there, he becomes despondent. He becomes disillusioned. He becomes confused. He says, I don't want to fight. I see Bhishmacharya there, one who raised me and taught me. I see my guru, Kulaguru, Dronacharya is there. How can I fight him? And I see all my cousins, Duryodhana downwards. So that is chapter 1. Okay. Then what is chapter 2? Chapter 2 is called Sankhya Yoga. Sankhya Yoga means, the entire chapter of the Gita is summarized. Arjuna first tells Krishna he doesn't want to fight. Then Krishna says, you have no choice. Then Arjuna asks for help. Now, what is the lesson here for you and me? God is always there, sometimes beside you, just like Krishna was beside Arjuna. But unless and until you ask God for help, he will just stand and watch. Ask and it shall be given. Isn't that the divine injunction in most religions? Swami also always says, isn't it? Come to me. Come with open arms. Talk to me. Then I'll know what to put in those empty hands. You all come with so full, hands so full, thoughts so full, and mouth shut. How am I going to communicate with you? So Sankhya Yoga, chapter 2. This is one of the biggest chapters. It has 72 verses, right? Chapter contains the essence of the Gita, basically, chapter 2. What is chapter 3? Chapter 3 is called Karma Yoga. You see, every chapter is referred to as a yoga. Then a yoga is a path. It's a union between body, mind, and soul. That's what yoga means, right? So every chapter in Bhagavad Gita is a type of yoga that takes you from one level of understanding to another level of understanding, moving your level of consciousness from one level to another level to another level, until the conscious becomes involved in the subconscious, and the subconscious reaches up to the superconscious, and there you have made a link. Trai Kara Suddhi. Okay, so chapter 3 is all about Karma Yoga. So here in this chapter, Krishna is explaining to Arjuna. He says, how you do your work is important, right? And one is liberated from his karmic consequences and can attain the supreme so long that he performs the duty without the attachment to the fruits of his duty. So this is one of the core teachings where Krishna is telling Arjuna, do your duty, don't focus on the results. Even if you're focused on the results, dedicate those results to me and then you're fine. You are not attached to anything. Remember, attachment builds karma. Remember my talks. Attachment builds karma. Okay, that's chapter 3, Karma Yoga. So if you want to just focus on Karma Yoga, just read chapter 3. You know, it is so fantastic, this book. It gives you all different approaches depending on what you want. Because you have the buddhi, you are Krishna, you are holding the reins of Viveka to your senses. So why does it matter what the other person is doing on his chariot? You drive your chariot, your body, in the direction that you want to go. Right? Control the mind through the intellect. How? By exercising the wisdom of discrimination so that your senses are controlled. Interesting. Every time you see this picture, remember this, right? Right way, right actions. Satyam dharma nasti, parat dharma. There is no more except truth and right action. Satyam vada, dharmam chara. Always speak the truth, always engage in rightful actions. In fact, if you look at thought of the day today, that was the message. I mean, of all days, you know, the first thing I look at once the clock goes over 12 o'clock, right, is look at the thought of the day. Every day. And I forward it on, you know, some groups and all that. And today, I'm starting Bhagavad Gita, and what is the thought of the day? And this is how the divine works. Satyam vadha, dharmam chara. Satyam nasti paro dharmaha. There is nothing beyond the exercise of speaking the truth and doing the right action. Okay, so chapter 3 talks about that. What about chapter 4? Chapter 4 is transcendental knowledge. You know, transcendental knowledge is called Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. 42 verses. Krishna explains the origin of the knowledge of the Gita. And, you know, if you do the reading that I'm asking you to do, Brother Ganesh will forward it to all the people who have registered. So you get the materials. If you read that, you'll understand what is meant by Jnana Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Right? Telling you what is the knowledge of the Gita, how it gets transferred from one age, one yuga to another yuga without losing its essence. And chapter 4 is important for you and me because it talks to you about the supreme nature of the Guru, the significance of having a Guru, right? And also it talks about if you're not focused on your Guru, when you're moving from one Guru to another, you're fixed on the, you know, physical form of the Guru. Then again, punarjanmaha, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani, jatare shayanam. Iha samsare, bahut dustare, kripaya pare, pahi murare. This life is riddled with difficulties. Therefore, you have to surrender to God. Kripaya pare, pahi murare. And who's Murare? Krishna. Right? There you go. Chapter 5 is called Karma Yoga in Action. See, chapter 4, he tells Arjuna what is yoga, karma. Chapter 5, he says what? Karma in action. Karma Yoga in action. It's called Karma Sannyasa Yoga. Yeah? It's got 29 verses. And all this is Arjuna asking Krishna a question, what is the best way to attain moksha? And then Krishna is explaining, first Karma Yoga, then Sannyasa Yoga. This is also the 4 paths of life, isn't it? Right? First you have the Brahmacharya, Ashramas, right? Chaturashrama, Brahmacharya, Grahastha, Vanapadishta, Sannyasa. So he's talking about this, the best way to attain moksha. Then chapter 6, this is the second yoga. Remember I spoke to you about Karma Yoga in chapter 3. Chapter 6 talks about Dhyana Yoga. Dhyana Yoga, he talks about Ashtanga Yoga. Ashtanga Yoga, 8-path yoga of how to bring your body, mind and soul into one level of equanimity so that you can vibrate at a conscious level that can link to the subconscious level, that can then relate to the superconscious level. Ashtanga Yoga, 8-path yoga. 8-stage yoga, Ashtanga. That means Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi. 8 stages. That is what is Ashtanga Yoga. And Krishna talks about this. He said, what you should be meditating is your mind. Control your mind. Meditation is simply that. Okay. That is chapter 6. So 3 is the first type of yoga, Karma Yoga. Second is Dhyana Yoga in chapter 6. Chapter 7 is called Jnana Vijnana Yoga. That is called knowledge of the absolute. Knowledge of the absolute. So here he is telling 30 verses. In these 30 verses, Krishna is telling Arjuna what is the knowledge of the absolute reality. And also here he talks about Maya. If you want to know how Maya can get in the way of you exercising complete intelligence, complete wisdom, chapter 7 is your go-to. So you see, you don't have to read the first 6 chapters. You just go to chapter 7, you get knowledge of the absolute. So long as you apply what is being said there, not just reading it. Knowing is of no use. Knowing anything, right? Knowledge is of no use. What Swami says, knowledge that is not put into practice or application is pure tinsel, useless. Chapter 8 tells you how to attain the supreme. Akshara Brahma Yoga. Chapter 8, 28 verses. In 28 verses, if you understand and apply it, you can buy the best ointment for joint pain. The best in the world. Hundreds of thousands of pounds, maybe it costs. Okay, let's say it costs a lot of money. You buy the ointment and they guarantee you your pain will go. It will only go once you apply it to where the pain is. Gita, if it is not applied, you will be in constant pain. I'm talking application. I'm not talking reading. Remember the story I told you at the beginning? The learned scholar, the learned Pandit, and the Brahmin who was able, because he could relate to it so much, he saw Krishna everywhere and he saw Arjuna everywhere. So one is a learner, one is the instructor. Life is full of learning and instruction. There you go. That is the message. You see, everything is a message, right? So chapter 8 talks about Akshara Brahma Yoga, attaining the supreme. Here he also tells you how to practice intellectual discrimination between deciding what is right and what is wrong. What is Brahma and what is Abrahma. Chapter 9. Raja Vidya Raja Guhya Yoga. Most confidential knowledge. In 34 verses, in this chapter, Krishna describes how he is the only one responsible. Right? Here, I think I mentioned in one of the karmic talks, right? Aham Atma Gudakesha Sarva Bhudasya Stitaha Aham Adischa Madhyancha Sarva Bhutanam Andayevacha. He's telling you, hey, you think this whole world functions on its own? No. Sarva Bhudasya Stitaha. I am in everything and everything is in me. Aham, me. Adischa, the beginning. Madhyancha, the middle. And Sarva Bhutanam Andayevacha. That is also me. The beginning, the middle and the end. So you must know that when you know that everything is me, and everything comes back to me, then once you have that link with me, then you'll be fine. So chapter 9 is about Raja Vidya, right? And sometimes that is described as the third pathway, third yoga. Chapter 10 is, you see, chapter 11 is when he gives Arjuna the grand vision of his, Vishwarupam. So chapter 10, he's got to actually build the portfolio before he releases, you know, who he is really. So chapter 10 talks about the opulence of the absolute. Vibhuti Vitsara Yoga. Vibhuti Visthara Yoga. Here Krishna says, Arjuna, you only realize that you are Arjuna in this life. I have gone through many lives, and I can remember and recall each one of them and what was the outcome of each. Therefore, you have to understand that I am what I am and you are what you are, but you can become me. How? By knowing the opulence of the absolute. 42 verses in chapter 10. Okay. Now, chapter 11 is a universal form. Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga, it's called. 55 verses. Now, 55 verses is all about Sanjaya describing to Dhritarashtra what magnificence he saw. Can you imagine Arjuna right there looking? If someone has a vision not being present, it's like watching something live and watching it on live telecast. Of course, there is a difference, isn't it? So Sanjaya was watching a live telecast of what was happening live in the battlefield, and Krishna showed himself in all the past lives. I am. Aham ekam cha. I am everything. That one. So universal form. And he gives Arjuna what we call dhyana drishti, divine sight, through which he can see. Because normal eyes you can't see unless you've achieved that level of purity, that level of bhakti and shraddha. Then yes, you will see God in everything. You will see God in everyone, right? Chapter 12 is Bhakti Yoga. Bhakti Yoga, there you go, the fourth pathway, right? Path of devotion. So Bhakti Yoga, so 20 verses. Again, Arjuna is not happy with the path of karma, the path of dhyana, and the path of jnana. So he says, is there any other way? Krishna says, yes, there's the path of bhakti. In 20 verses, he's telling him how you can exercise Bhakti Yoga and how devotion can help a person reach moksha. He also explains in this chapter 12, in the 20 verses, the different stages of Bhakti. Oh, fantastic, right? Just read that if you want to take the path. The Swami said, in this Kali Yuga, the easiest yoga is Bhakti Yoga. And he defines 9 pathways, Navavida Bhakti, right? And I've spoken about that before as well. So, if you are, this is your path, Bhakti Yoga, chapter 12. Chapter 13, he talks about human life. Kshetraknya Vibhava Yoga. That means the nature, the enjoyer, and how that relates to consciousness. So, 35 verses. Here, Krishna helps Arjuna to differentiate between the physical body and the soul. He also helps Arjuna to differentiate between consciousness at a physical level, bhu level, so that you can traverse to the bhuloka, from bhuloka to bhuvaloka, bhuvaloka to swaloka, to universal consciousness. Consciousness at the bhuloka level, how to transcend that to go into the consciousness at the swaloka, bhuva, swaha, 3 planes of consciousness. So fantastic. Chapter 14, he talks about the 3 modes of material nature. It's called Gunatraya. Guna means material nature, characteristic. Traya means 3. Gunatraya Vibhava Yoga. 3 modes of material nature. Right? The 3 gunas and their characteristics. You know about the 3 gunas. Okay. Right? How to transcend the gunas. And chapter 15 talks about the yoga of the Supreme Person. It's called Purushottama Yoga. This is chapter 15. 20 verses, he talks about samsara, 4 things. He talks about samsara, jiva, jagat, and purushottama. Samsara, jiva, jagat, purushottama. Right? 16 talks about the 16 demonic qualities. Divine and demonic qualities. Chapter 16. Deva Asura Sampat Vibhava Yoga. Deva Asura. Deva means Deva, Devic qualities. Asura means Asuric qualities, Rakshasas, right? Sampat Vibhava Yoga. Deva Asura Sampat Yoga. Yeah, of course, he talks about the traits of the Devas and, of course, the Asuras. And he talks about Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mara, Mamada, Matsarya, Ahankara. All this that you have to give up in order for you to progress in your spiritual path. 17, he says, you want to have faith? There are three types of faith. Shraddha Traya Vibhava Yoga. Shraddha means faith, Traya means three. Three types of faith. Chapter 17. Right? He describes these three types of faith and he tells you how these affects people's faith and their behavior. Fantastic. You think it was written in Dwapara Yuga and therefore it doesn't relate to today's day and age, today's living? You're wrong. You're deadly wrong. Once you go into it, you'll know, oh my God, everything that is stated there, relevant today. Very relevant today, not just relevant. And finally, chapter 18, right, marks the end of the war on the 18th day, right? But in the first day itself, Krishna has already said, chapter 18 is talks about Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. He's talking about the perfect path of renunciation. Renunciation. Right? So this is the conclusory chapter. And Krishna asks Arjuna, completely surrender. Purna Sharanagati. Again, I've spoken about this on many occasions. Purna Sharanagati. Sharanagati is surrender. Purna Sharanagati is complete surrender. Which is better? Complete surrender is better. You know how sometimes you surrender and you know it's not complete surrender. So you have to change that way. You have to change that way of thinking. You have to change that way of behavior. Ultimate perfection of life is complete surrender. This is Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Beautiful chapter, right? You can never get enough, reading and reading and reading and reading, right? Because each time you read, you see something different, right? Two types of knowledge, right? One is at a physical level where you become, a BA in art or an MA in arts or an MSc in physics or a doctorate, all that art, science, engineering, maths, all that physical knowledge. Then you have the spiritual knowledge to know, to have the wisdom, to use the intellect to distinguish between the mind, the body, and the soul. Two types of knowledge. And the Gita teaches you how to move from physical knowledge to spiritual knowledge. That is the secret. How to move from physical knowledge to spiritual knowledge. That's why you should read it. Not just read it, understand it and apply it to your life, right? That's the contemporary message. Some people will sit and analyze with whatever degree of rationality. Analyze the Gita, analyze this, analyze that. At the end of the day, they're missing the point. As I said in the beginning, my focus is what Krishna told Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra at that time. Today, how does it apply to me? That's where I am focusing, right? Not how beautifully shloka number 17 of chapter 2 sounds. Two greatest teachings from the Gita. If you want to conclude the Gita, the introduction, then you say, Paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya chatuskritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Beautiful. Paritranaya sadhuna vinashaya chatuskritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. He's giving you the divine assurance. Whenever there is a decline in unrighteousness or righteousness, whenever unrighteousness is overwhelmingly present, then I will incarnate from age to age. What some of you need? He's already telling you. The moment you surrender, I will come. I will incarnate. In fact, Krishna was the 8th avatar. And every avatar was there in order to reinstall and reinstate Dharma. And in every avatar, we know what the karmic consequences of adharmic actions are. From Matsya avatar right up to Buddha avatar. Right? So the Gita teaches you how to exercise your moral self, engage your duties, and lots of people have said something. Albert Einstein beautifully, he said, whenever I read the Bhagavad Gita, I reflect about how God created this universe. When I see that understanding coming forth out of the Gita, everything else seems so superfluous. That is Einstein. Schwarzenbach said, every time I have a problem, all I need to do is turn a page of the Gita and I get my answer. German philosopher, German physicist. Gandhi also said the thing, when doubts haunt me, when disappointments stare me in the face, and I see not a ray of hope, I open the Gita, and there I find the answer. I find the verse that verily comforts me. And he says, those who meditate on the Gita, you'll only get joy. Why go so far? Our Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, he has spoken about the Gita so many times. Every day he reads the Gita, he says. He says, I did not believe that the Gita will also give me some guidance in politics, but it does verily. Of course, it was dealing with two political families, the Kaurava family and the Pandava family, both in relation to the same throne. So the throne here can be a country or a state, right? And there's, government of the day and opposition party. Brothers and sisters, you tell me anything, any incident from the Gita, and I will tell you there's a lesson there to be learned. And that's what we need to see. We need to look beyond what we see in terms of caricature, in terms of who is doing what in the battlefield. We need to see beyond, right? Vivekananda also said the secret of Karma Yoga. The secret of Karma Yoga is to perform your actions without any fruitive desires. This is what Krishna told Arjuna. So if the Lord himself has come in avatar form and said, this is what you need to do to get moksha, then where is the confusion? Where is the doubt? Right. There we go. So the moment you realize that there is a greater force and you surrender to that greater force, then you become part of that force. And you will reverberate with that force. And that force will get you from one state of knowledge to another state of knowledge. And that knowledge will give you the knowledge of moksha or liberation, or the knowledge of how to quell, curtail, cut the continuous cycle of punarjanmaha or birth and rebirth. Okay. So with that, I will bring this introductory lecture to a stop. Next week, I am going to be looking at chapter 1 and chapter 2, give you the essence. It's like apple, orange, you put inside a blender and you drink the juice. So I'm going to make the juice and give you have to drink, right? And obviously, become more healthy. By becoming more healthy, I mean becoming more healthy spiritually. Little bit of practice, little bit, right? If at the end of these 11 weeks, right, you can change yourself 2%, 3%, 5%, 10%, it's great. But if you just listen and then, it just goes, then, hey, you have to ask yourself, what have I got? Where is my learning curve? What have I got out of this, right? What's the point of me, listening to this man for 11 weeks if I can't, engender an ounce of change, an ounce of transformation? So I said, end of the Bhagavad Gita equals personal transformation. Finish. If you want me to give you the essence of Gita, I said Bhagavad Gita equals individual or personal transformation. Nothing else. Transformation from Manusha to Purusha. Your birth as a Manusha to realize that you are Purusha. That is what I mean, personal transformation. Therein lies the difficulty, because this mind and Maya, the two M. Mind and Maya. They will come and say, why? Just enjoy yourself now. Forget about this next birth and all that. I got time. Enjoy it. Enjoy. So, Swasti Prajabhyam Parivalayantham Nyayena Margena Mahi Mahisha Go Brahmanebhyo Subhamastu Nityam Samasta Loka Sukhino Bhavantu Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Sai Ishvararphanamastu.